A few years ago, a blood test told me I was headed towards prediabetes, and that number made no sense to me. I consider myself an athlete, I train constantly, just about every day, and I'm lean. When people look at me, they assume I'm healthy. Around the same time, I read an article that convinced me to completely cut added sugar from my diet. So I did just that. When I got tested again, the number had barely changed. That was the beginning of a lesson that took me a long time to learn. Being fit and being metabolically healthy are not the same thing. You can be one and not the other, and you cannot see the difference in the mirror. So let me back up. Get a blood test every year before my physical. My glucose had been drifting upward for just a bit, maybe a few years. And until that year, it came back borderline pre-diabetic. So at that physical, I asked my doctor what to do. His advice was exactly what you'd expect. Cut added sugar, exercise more. Good advice. Problem was, I was already doing both of those things. So I stopped waiting for someone else to solve it, and I decided to treat my own body like an experiment. Here's how I thought about it. My engineering background is going to show a bit. If you want to know what's causing something, you hold everything else constant and change one thing at a time. So that's what I had done. Same training, same sleep, same life, and I changed one variable. I cut added sugar. Barely moved the needle. I even got a glucose monitoring kit. I started pricking my finger every day just for months, just trying to see what was driving this. And I was at a loss. That is, until I made one big change. I shifted the center of my plate to whole plant foods. I went plant forward. And this time the numbers moved down a lot. But here's the thing. That one change was not the change one thing at a time test. Going plant forward is not one change. It's a dozen changes embedded into one single choice. It removed a lot from my diet, the obvious one being all kinds of meat. It added fiber and whole foods as replacements to that. And it crowded out the sauces and processed foods I was having with a lot of those meals because I just didn't have room for them on the plate anymore. I changed almost everything my meals were built on. So unfortunately, I can't hand you this clean cause and effect statement that says, go vegan, your glucose will follow. And in fact, that's exactly the kind of single story claim we spent my whole last video learning to distrust. What I can do is tell you what the evidence says was probably doing the real work. When whole plant foods move to the center of the plate, three things happen that the research is clear about. Fiber goes up, and viscous soluble fiber forms a gel in your gut that physically slows how fast sugar reaches your blood. You start eating food with its structure intact. The fiber and cell walls that processing strips away. And the good food crowds out the bad. Every time a whole food takes a spot on your plate, a processed one probably loses its spot. That's the mechanism, not magic, replacement. And it's simple enough to put on one page. So I made a card. The highest value food swaps, the exact replacements the evidence supports, the kind you can take to the grocery store. It's free. The link is below and up here, and it lines up with guidance from the American Diabetes Association. But there's a fourth change in that plate, and it turns out to be the key to this whole thing. Going plant forward didn't just add, it pulled something out. Meat, of course, and with it, a lot of saturated fat. And I'm going to tag this one as likely, not totally proven, but the chemistry's clean on it. And it's worth one sentence. Your body builds a certain kind of lipid called ceramide, and saturated fat is the raw material it uses to do it. Remember that word, ceramide. comes back in a few minutes, and it's the hinge everything turns on. Because replacing my food explained why things got better, it still didn't answer the question that I had nagged me for the whole time. Why did cutting sugar alone do so little in the first place? Here's the answer, and it reframes everything. When I cut sugar, I was reducing how much glucose was coming in. But my problem was never really the amount coming in. It was that the glucose already in my blood wasn't getting out of my bloodstream and into my cells where it belongs. The thing that ushers glucose out of your blood and into your cells is insulin. Think of insulin as knocking on the cell's door and the door opening to let the glucose in. But in my body, the cells had stopped answering. The door's still there, insulin's still knocking, but nobody's opening it. That's insulin resistance. That's why I was getting prediabetes. So the glucose just sits in the blood and the number stays high. So do you see the trap I was in? I was cutting the sugar coming in when my real problem was the glucose already there that couldn't get out. So the real question becomes, what made my cells stop answering the door? And that's where we have to talk about fat. Because the biggest culprit isn't the fat that you can see, it's the fat you can't. There are two kinds. There's the fat just under your skin, the kind you can pinch. That one's mostly passive storage, relatively harmless. And then there's the fat deep inside your abdomen, wrapped around your organs, visceral fat. And that fat is not passive at all. It behaves like an active inflammatory organ, pumping out signals that drive insulin resistance and inflame your blood vessels. This is the fat that jams the door from the outside. Here's the part that should stop all of us. In the Framingham heart study, one of the longest running heart studies in the world, that deep hidden fat stayed linked to metabolic disease, even after researchers accounted for body weight and even for waist size. You can be healthy weight, and you can have a decent waist measurement and still be carrying the fat that hurts us most. That is how a lean, fit athlete ends up staring at a pre-diabetic number he can't explain. Me. My fitness was real, but it was hiding something the mirror could never show me. Now, visceral fat jams the door from the outside, but there's a second lock. It's on the inside, in the muscle itself. And this is where that word comes back, ceramide. First though, I have to clear up something, because the muscle part is stranger than it sounds. Researchers call it the athlete's paradox. We've touched on it before in this channel. Trained endurance athletes, some of the most insulin-sensitive people you can measure, carry just as much fat inside their muscle as people with type 2 diabetes. Same amount of fat, opposite metabolic health. How? In one study, researchers put previously sedentary older adults through 16 weeks of moderate exercise, and the fat inside their muscle actually went up by about 21%. But at that very same time, their insulin sensitivity got better by about 21%. The fat rose and the door started opening again. Because it was never about the amount of fat, it was about the kind. Most of the fat in trained muscle is harmless. It's fuel, constantly burned and replaced. I've talked about this before. But a specific lipid buried in there is not harmless. That's ceramide. Ceramide is what jams the lock from the inside. In the study, as the people exercised, their ceramide went down. And that drop was the thing that tracked with their insulin working again. Now, put the two pieces together. Something I couldn't see when I was pricking my finger and blaming sugar. My training was burning that ceramide down, and cutting saturated fat was cutting off the raw material to build it back up. 2 levers, 1 lock. And that's why neither move had worked alone. Cut only the sugar, and the ceramide was still there, still being fed. Train, but eat the way I always had, and I was burning it down and rebuilding it at the same time. It took both, food and training for the door to finally open and the glucose to clear. And here's the part that stays with me. My doctor's advice wasn't wrong. Cut sugar, exercise more is reasonable, but it was aimed at the inputs. Nobody walked me through the machinery, that my problem was clearance, not intake, and that the dietary lever that mattered was as much the saturated fat I wasn't questioning as the sugar I was. That connection, I had to find myself. It was very enlightening to me. It took a long time to find, not something many people will tell you, and it's exactly why I make these videos. I ended up with good numbers, but look at what it took. Not one silver bullet. Don't let anybody tell you there's this one thing that's going to fix you. It took a whole system. The right foods, the right replacements, all of it riding on staying active. And it won't look identical for you, unfortunately. There is not a magic formula because the same food genuinely lands differently in different bodies. It's not a cop-out. It's one of those most consistent findings you will find in the field. You take good advice and you build the system that works for you. That system, all the foods and the replacements and the timing fit together, is exactly what I'm building into the Road Less Traveled Nutrition program. You'll see it announced on the newsletter first. Hopefully you're already signed up for that. So before I go, grab the swap card at the link in the description or right here. It's the simplest first step there is. If this is helping you, subscribe, because the next video is the one that finally turns all of this into a daily routine you can actually run. The 3 decisions that do most of the work. And add your thoughts to the comments. Everyone is different, and I want to hear what's worked for you. This is the country I get to think all of this through. Right here, through the trees, above the lake. Trust the evidence. Trust your body. Engineer your health span. I'm Patrick, and I'll see you out there.